Hi, how are you guys? Welcome to week 2, chapter 2. This is your lecture on the chapter 2 lecture notes. We are still in this book, Fashion Forecasting. This is the 5th edition, but you guys can also use the 4th edition. My lectures will be based on the 5th edition. So today we're going to go over chapter 2. Generally, right? It's always your guys' responsibility to read the chapter, take notes, highlight, take note of key terms. All of that stuff is kind of up to you guys because this is an asynchronous class where you guys are completely online. All right, so here we go. All right. Okay, so chapter 2 is part of part 1, forecasting frameworks. Chapter 2 specifically is on innovation and novelty. A couple of objectives for this chapter. So after you read the chapter, you should be able to answer or identify all of these objectives. So the first one is describing the characteristics of an innovation and how one becomes a trend. Okay. Second is identifying the key individuals who propel an innovation into a trend through their approval and adoption. 3 is analyzing current fashions within a theoretical framework. 4 is establishing a theoretical model as a tool for analysis and communication. 5 is summarizing the diffusion process. So how innovations diffuse within a social system, the kind of consumer who participates in each stage, and the social process involved in transmitting fashion innovation. And lastly is identifying diffusion of innovation as a framework for understanding and predicting the change in fashion. Okay, so let's start with innovation and trends. And innovation is something new that is introduced to the public for approval and adoption. Okay, so this is something that has not been around in quite some time, whether it's a trend or a fad or a classic that hasn't had popularity in a while, or maybe has never hit the market and is introduced to the general public for their approval. Okay, first approval and then their adoption. So we can approve of a lot of trends, right? We can approve of Von Dutch trucker hats coming back, but do we actually adopt it, right? Do we actually go out and search for one? Do we actually go and put one on and wear that out? That is a slight difference between an approval and adoption. Okay. Embryonic trends. These are the very first stages in the development of an innovation. And if fashion innovators and fashion forward retailers adopt a trend, okay, and then the public starts to become aware of it and they start to accept it, this is called a directional trend. So essentially, the retailers and the innovators are adopting it on purpose, and then that is trickling down to the public. Okay, the evolution of a trend. The 3 stages in the evolution of a trend are fringe, trendy, and mainstream. Okay, and you guys will have to read about that and look that up in your chapter. Innovations have a potential to become mainstream trends only if they have a desirable set of tangible and intangible benefits. Okay, so essentially an innovation can become something that is accepted by the mainstream if they have 2 different sets of benefits. One is tangible. Can I actually get my hands on this trend or this innovation? And the other one is intangible. If I wear this, will I be cool or will I be accepted into this certain subgroup, right? That's an intangible benefit and can be modified and expressed in different ways to appeal to a broader public. So let's bring back the new silhouette of jeans that we're seeing trending in the market, which is a looser, baggier fit, right? Because this has been now accepted by a big, broad portion of the general public, we can see that this has now been modified and expressed in different ways. Anywhere from Gen Zers wearing it with Air Force Ones to, older generations wearing it with a chunky loafer, right? Even 2 different subcultures, right? Ravers never stopped wearing looser, baggier fit of a jean silhouette. So that silhouette in general can be modified in multiple different ways. So that actually lends to a bigger appeal and a wider acceptance. characteristics of innovation adoption. Okay, so Rogers is a very important term. Okay, this is someone that identified characteristics that would help us or hinder the adoption of an innovation. So essentially placing certain titles or certain categories that either help, right? Either help an innovation become adopted or actually push back that innovation and don't allow it to become adoptive. So number one is relative advantage. And this is the perception that the innovation is more satisfactory than items that already exist in the same class of products. Okay, so relative advantage. Let's talk about, I don't know, well, we can talk about the same denim, right, that we were talking about previously. So we have the dad jean on the scene. A lot of people are adopting that trend. Now, if a new innovation comes out to where the dad jean is now embellished, maybe the back pocket has an embellishment, or maybe there is a leather patch on the denim. For the general population that has already adopted this innovation or has already kind of thought about adopting the innovation, is that extra embellishment or extra style factor going to broaden their perception that that innovation is better than the ones that are already on the scene, right? So is the jean with the embellishment more attractive than just the plain denim? Okay, there's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on the person, and that's why it's called a relative advantage. So essentially, if a bunch of people think, wow, that embellishment on that denim really makes me want to buy it, and I think it's way better than just the plain denim in that same silhouette, then you are going to have great relative advantage. Okay, second is compatibility. This is the estimate of harmony between the innovation and the values and norms of potential adopters. Okay, so let's talk about something not being compatible. If you are someone that is very conservative in dress, okay, and we are talking now about the new Miu Miu silhouette of mini skirts that has hit everyone, very low waisted, short mini skirt that everyone wants to get their hands on. This might be adopted by a great portion of the market, but for someone that is a moderate and conservative dresser because of maybe their religion or their geographical location or their family morals or values, this is not going to be compatible with that harmony of adopting that innovation, right? Someone that completely covers themselves in dress is not going to purchase that Miu Miu low slung hip hugger miniskirt, right? Third is complexity. Okay, the gauge of the difficulty faced by a consumer in understanding and using the innovation. Okay, this often happens with our older generations, right? Actually happened to me with my mom. I want the chunky Prada loafers, right? That have about 3-inch lug sole. And my mom can't understand why I would pay $2,000+ for a chunky loafer because it's so specific and only goes with certain things in her eyes, and not spend $100 on just a plain loafer with a normal sole, right? So right there, we can understand that it's very difficult for my mom, her generation, to understand, why would I use this innovation? Why is this important, right? I can just buy something that is a 1/16 of the cost and will never go out of style because a classic loafer has never gone out of style, right? So the complexity is something really interesting to deep dive into, because if a consumer thinks something is difficult or doesn't understand why it's important, they most likely won't adopt the innovation. Yeah. Okay, so triability. This is the relative ease of testing out the innovation before making a decision. So, can I purchase a pair of big lug soled Prada loafers, maybe fake ones at a cheaper price, and trying out that silhouette and seeing if it even goes with anything in my closet, right? Before making that adoption process and investing in that innovation that is quite expensive. Okay, can we kind of test it out before making the full decision of, you know what, yes, I am going to go full force with this innovation. And then observability, okay? The degree of visibility afforded by the innovation. Are we seeing it everywhere? When we talk about that Miu Miu low slung mini skirt, okay? During Fashion Week, we saw it on models, we saw it on the runway, we saw it on influencers, we saw it on celebrities, we saw it on Diet Prada, we saw it all over Instagram. If we're constantly observing the innovation, we're most likely going to be more inclined to adopt the innovation. Yes? Okay, perceived risk. This is a consumer's imagined potential of consequences of purchasing something new and novel. These consequences may involve, first, economic risks. Okay, so me buying those Prada loafers, which is a big portion of my salary, right? That might cause an economic risk. Okay, the risk of performance problems after the purchase. So if I purchase those Prada loafers, even if I wear them every day, $2,500 out of my salary is going to a material good that could essentially go on towards my mortgage, right? So it's a huge economic risk. The purchase price may reduce the ability to buy other products, and sometimes it's an economic risk because that price sometimes will fall after purchase. So this isn't as true in luxury, right? If we know anything about luxury, we know that our price stays pretty static. Okay, so Prada loafers sometimes eventually go up in price because they're harder to find or they're not making them anymore. But let's just talk about something that is just expensive, a designer pair of jeans, right, that you get for $250. That still can be an economic risk, because if you buy those jeans, maybe you can't buy the pair of tennis shoes that you really need or a backpack for school. And then if after you decide to invest in the denim, the designer pair of jeans, they go on sale, that is going to be a huge risk and a negative afterthought after purchasing that good, right? Enjoyment risk, okay? The risk of becoming bored by the purchase or not liking it as much as expected. So that is something my mom mentioned when I was talking about buying the Prada loafers. What if you wear it with 3 or 4 outfits and then they're not in style anymore? You've wasted $2,500, right? So that risk of maybe purchasing or adopting an innovation and then either it not working with your wardrobe, not working with your lifestyle, or you just actually don't like it as much as you thought you would. I'm sure that this has happened to some of you guys, where you purchase something that you've been dreaming about forever, and then you get it and you're kind of underwhelmed by the product or what kind of feeling or emotion it brings to you. And lastly is social risk. Okay, this is the risk that the consumer's social group will not approve. So have you ever been in your group of friends and you're trying out a new trend and everyone's kind of doesn't buy into it? Like, oh, that looks kind of weird, or where'd you get that top, right? So if your social group doesn't approve or respond to the innovation that you're adopting, oftentimes we leave that innovation because we want to be a part of that group and we want to be accepted. Okay, so that's the social risk of, adopting a new innovation. Okay, let's talk about media influence and innovation adoption. Okay, whether or not it's a trend and it's adopted by the trendsetters, and ultimately the mainstream can depend on some external factors. Okay, so whether or not the trend is being adopted, okay, either by trendsetters or the mainstream, some of this can depend on external factors, including information cascades. So how we receive the information on these trends. Okay, the label, this is a very important term, the label of the trend. Okay, if it's catchy, if there's a buzz, a coattail effect, and a flow. Okay, you're gonna have to look up these terms in your book. And lastly, contagion. Okay, and under contagion, we have memes, buzz, and hype. So is there information circulating on our social media channels, on our TVs, in our movies, where it's showing these trends either being made fun of or being made viral? Is there buzz from your favorite influencers and hype over a certain trend that's coming into a market? Trend management. So the decisions designers and merchandisers make are affected by 3 classes of change. Okay, very important for your midterm and just in general. Number 1, short-term variations. Okay, this can be a path of trends as they emerge, evolve, and dissipate. Okay, so short term, right? Are we adopting a trend? And designers and merchandisers are kind of seeing if they should adopt the trend. Is there going to be in the short term a huge variation where the trend emerges, it evolves, and it dissipates in a really short amount of time? Okay. Cyclical variations, as when the style features repeat over time in response to an underlying trend. So we continue to see the trends. We can talk about this with skinny jean silhouette, right? We can continue when it first came out. We can continue to see the trends in different variations and different styles from different retailers, merchandisers, designers, because the underlying trend was that the whole denim movement was moving towards that silhouette. Or long-term trends, where there are fundamental and continuous changes in the pattern of culture. Let's talk about the diffusion process. So the diffusion curve illustrates how a trend starts slowly. Let me bring my mouse over here. Okay, so it begins in the beginning of time and how it initially starts very slow. Okay, it slowly starts to get adopted by our innovators. These are the first people that are seeing the trend. Our early adopters are opinion leaders. Okay, so these are maybe influencers, people that lend their opinion on social media. Okay, so these are like fashion, top fashion people. Let's talk about innovators like designers, fashion people that work in fashion publications, stuff like that. The early adopters and the opinion leaders are like more like influencers, people that really have an opinion and lend those opinions to others. Then it peaks. Okay, right here is the peak. That's the top. That's the most number of adopters that are accepting this trend. Okay, and that's the majority. That's us, most of us. Okay, the majority of people are accepting this trend, using it, buying it, wearing it, repeating it. Okay, and then it declines into our late adopters, which are typically like our parents, right? They're a little late to things, or maybe someone in a different country that doesn't have access to information. And then it completely declines into the laggards. These are people that are not interested in fashion, use fashion as function, maybe only buy things that are extremely discounted, right? So they're getting seasons and seasons behind worth of merchandise. So essentially this process resembles a bell-shaped curve. Yeah. So if we talk about innovators and early adopters of opinion leaders, these are our fashion leaders. Okay, these people are considered the leaders in fashion. Everyone else, okay, are considered fashion followers. Even though you might be right here in the beginning of the majority, right, where you instantly see an influencer wearing something and you go out and buy it the next day, whether or not your group of friends like it, whether or not it's in your budget, you go out and buy it because you are instantly attracted to that trend. If you're part of this majority, you are still considered a fashion follower. Okay, the consumer adoption process. The consumer adoption process considers how the adoption will affect the way the consumers present himself or herself to others and how others will react to the result. There are several versions of the step in the mental process. Okay, so we start out with awareness, interest, evaluation, trial, and adoption. That's where we start. Once we go through that, we go through our knowledge and our persuasion of the trend or adopting a trend or a good. We make the decision, we implement it, and we confirm it. Okay, so this is how it's changed throughout the years. Problem perception, awareness. Okay, so similar to here, but first we're identifying maybe there's a couple problems with adopting this trend or good. We're becoming aware of the trend or the good. We're then comprehending it. How is it used? Why is it used? What does it mean if you use it? Then we're forming an attitude towards it, an opinion. Do we like it? Do we want it? Do we dislike it? Is it annoying to us? Okay. Then we're legitimizing it. Then we try it, trial. If we decide that it's something for us, we try it out, we see how it works. We then adopt it as part of our wardrobe, and then it causes dissonance. Fashion change agents. Change agents are a very small group of innovators who begin the diffusion process, followed by a larger group of opinion leaders. Okay, so these change agents are communicating fashion trends visually and verbally. They're wearing the trend, they're talking about the trend before it has even hit the majority. Okay, typically they're more knowledgeable and interested in fashion compared to others in the group. That's what they do. They live and breathe fashion. Okay, they're surrounded by it, they work in it, they understand it. And then they have an aesthetic taste and social sensitivity to assemble a stylish look. So these people have a specific style, they like certain things, their aesthetic is very specific. When others recognize them for their abilities, they become influentials. Okay, so once this change agents are recognized, they then become influentials, which is a group members who establish the standards of dress for the others in a group. Okay, so if you talk about an influencer, let's talk about like all those Revolve influencers, right? They're establishing how you should dress on a night out or how you should dress from work from home. They're establishing the standards of dress for others in other groups. Innovative people can be segmented into 3 groups with a different profile. So the first group is cognitive innovators. These people prefer new mental experiences. They enjoy novelty when associated with thinking and problem solving. Okay, so these people are constantly challenging their cognitive balance, right? They want to continue to adopt new things. They want new experiences. They like to think, they like to problem solve. They're constantly being challenged. Second group is sensory innovators. So these people prefer experience that stimulate the senses, right? An experience, okay? They want a full-on experience. They have easygoing attitudes towards life. They take risks. They participate in pleasurable activities without thinking about it too much. They just kind of go for things. And they engage in dreaming and fantasy. Okay, so these are definitely whimsical, creative people. And lastly is cognitive sensory innovators. These prefer both cognitive and sensory experiences. So if you are a little bit of both, okay, you are going to be a cognitive sensory innovator. Modeling the diffusion process. So the theoretical model of diffusion for the Rogers model shows a 2-step flow. Okay, step 1 is an impersonal influence. Okay, impersonal influence is anything that we see in the media, right, or done by retailers. So this is an ad in a magazine, or people wearing the innovation in your favorite TV show, or an advertisement at a bus stop, or the mannequins at your favorite luxury retail store. Okay, all of these things are pushing innovative consumers to adopt the innovation. Okay, step 2 is a personal influence, and this is where the opinion leaders come in, because they are personally reaching out to their followers, okay, their fashion followers, to adopt the innovation. Yeah, so they have that kind of one-on-one connection with their followers. They're able to kind of personally influence everyone. Okay, modeling the diffusion process. The BASS theoretical model shows that most consumers at the beginning of a diffusion process adopt the innovation based on impersonal influences, such as mass media, right? So impersonal, okay? Most subsequent adopters make the decision based on interpersonal influence, so personal influence. Okay, so over time, we've realized that personal influence creates a bigger bell curve, a higher peak, okay, a more natural cycle of adoption, because it is tailored to our needs and what we look for, right? We follow influencers, or we listen to opinion leaders because we admire them. So, if Rihanna is telling me that this is the best new silhouette for a jacket and she's wearing it constantly, I'm probably going to adopt that silhouette of a jacket because I admire Rihanna. Okay, the S curve is a cumulative form of the Rogers diffusion, which more clearly mirrors the growth phase of the product cycle. Okay, so as we gain adopters, the growth of the product, excuse me, rises. Okay, so in the innovator phase, the product is just being introduced. There's not a lot of it. Okay, and as the laggards approve and start to adopt that innovation, it is everywhere, right? You can find it at Walmart, you can find it at Nordstrom Rack, you can find it at TJ Maxx. The innovation has now passed the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and now has hit the laggards and is everywhere. Okay, so everyone has kind of gotten a piece of that innovation. Okay, in Modis 1992 theoretical model, the innovation is introduced and goes through the growth cycle until that market niche is filled. Then begins a period of chaos during which a new niche is identified. When identified, another growth cycle begins, and so on. So once the innovation is introduced and goes through the growth cycle, there's a chaotic phase, okay, where a new niche is identified in order to kind of confuse the adoption process, and we start another growth process. So it's a little chaotic, but it has worked in the past. All right, that is the end of chapter 2, a very general overview. It is your responsibility to read chapter 2, okay, especially for your homework this week. They're more critical thinking questions, so you will have to have read the chapter in order to understand what is being asked of you. All right, reach out if you need any questions answered. Thank you so much, you guys.